I always love when James Morrow's in the man cave because he's enthusiastic about the theme, doing the air guitar.
I always do the air guitar.
I love it. All right, you could see him in many different shows, but of course, Outsiders on Sunday and the US Report here on Fridays. Matt Canavan, well, he as always is out and about on the hustings, and now is not going to hold back on his view when it comes to what happened and where we go from here. Senator, thank you very much for joining us. Always good to have you on the show. All right, so I'll start with you first, Matt, because it's a really easy question. Why did it happen?
Look, Paul, I think it happened because we didn't have anything to fight for. I've done a few campaigns now, and I found this one the strangest because I didn't really have a passionate thing to throw my whole weight into and take up the battle to my political opponents. In the Labor Party, every other election I've been to, we're fighting against carbon taxes, trying to stop the boats, trying to start Adani, stop carbon taxes going on mines, and I've done a lot of that on your show. And this time, I struggle to understand. Okay, what am I trying to do that either stops Labor doing something bad or allows us to do something good? Because in the last few days, and I've shut up. I haven't said much since the election. Thankfully, I had to go to a soccer tournament for my 10-year-old son. He didn't get as thumped as badly as us on Saturday night, so that was nice. But every other election I've been to, we've had something to fight for, and this one I just didn't know. And we've got to rediscover that fighting spirit. I've heard a lot of people say, we've got to go left, we've got to go right. It's not about that. It's about, okay,
100%.
what do we think we can do best for the Australian people? And maybe let's start with that. Our polls has got it massively wrong. And the most frustrating thing over my political career has been the increasing use of polling and focus groups to decide not just how we talk about something, how we argue for something, but how and what we should do. And I think we need to toss those out. We need to not talk to the pollsters for about a year. They probably deserve not to be paid their bills for a year anyway. So toss them out of the room and sit down deeply and think about what we think is best for the Australian people that are doing it very, very tough right now. We come up with that, we come up with a plan, and then we can invite the pollsters back in to talk about, okay, how's the best way to argue for this and how should we communicate? Should I have part my hair on this side or that, or whatever they do. But we need to rediscover why we fight. I like to fight. I'm in this to try and make a difference, to take up the battle, to define the battle lines between us and the Labor Party. Not just because I like to do that in the political context. I think the Australian people deserve that. The Australian people deserve, at an election of this consequence, to have a choice of alternatives. And I don't think we clearly enough gave them that choice at this election. Despite the 12 interest rate rises, the lack of control over our borders, despite this government being one of the first governments, I think the first government in history, to shut down a whole agricultural industry in the live sheep trade, we have made no inroads, in fact gone massively backwards, and that's unacceptable. We've got to, as I say, rediscover that fighting spirit and come up with a I think a more tougher approach next time.
James, again, you've written some beautiful columns about this. I know you spoke at some length yesterday about it, so there will be plenty of people that have heard your opinion. But for those that haven't, why did this happen?
Well, I think, Paul, it comes down to a very simple question. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to try and overanalyze this and say, as you said, quite eloquently before, it's not about, we need to move more to the left or we need to move more to the right. The fact is, across the political spectrum that would be voting for the Liberals, because remember, the Liberals are supposed to be a broad church as defined by John Howard. That was always the great struggle of the Liberals before John Howard managed to come to that settlement. There was nothing for anybody across that broad tent to really hook into. And I think, the problem is that the Liberal Party decided that all of the failings of the Albanese government were going to overwhelm them, and they would just simply trip over in just a little bit of jiu-jitsu and sticking the foot out, and boom, 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 Albanese falls over and the whole thing, and then we're back in government. Well, I said on this program, I said on Outsiders, I wrote it, advising Peter Dutton publicly saying, there is no shame in losing a first term in opposition, but you're not going to win if you don't swing for the fences. They didn't even come up to the plate, right? And now we're seeing all of these stories about everything that went wrong. I think the most shocking thing now is the amount of policy that was left on the table. And I have spoken to people who were sending policies up to head office, and they were ignored. And we had the story in the Financial Review today that bracket creep, which is such a key tax reform issue, because if the tax rates today were set when they were last set, that top rate would kick in around $280,000 or $290,000 a year, not $180,000. You want to talk about cost of living relief? Cut people's taxes. Stop taking more out of their tax bill every year. This is not hard stuff, and yet they forgot all of this. They forgot their reason for being. I actually think, they have now left Australia with a potential lost decade to Labor at a time when you've got defense, you've got debt, you've got everything else piling up. And all of these things, all of the issues should have been natural advantages for them, and they couldn't capitalize on a single one. It was a disgrace.
Okay, Matt, get in.
I don't agree with that at
there?
all. I think we can win the next election, certainly one after that. I mean, look, this is the worst result since the Liberal Party was founded at the 1946 election. At that election, they won just 17 seats, and by the next election, they came back and won over 70 seats and won government. That was after the then Labor government sought to nationalise the banks and refused to stop rationing petrol and other things. And look, who knows how the next few years are going to play out? And we're probably in a position where it will require the other side to make a few mistakes. But given the record of this government, that's a pretty sure thing. So, we're going to be ready there to take advantage. And as I say, put this strong alternative to the Australian people, just like Anastasia Palaszczuk did after Campbell Newman's victory, after Kevin Rudd did, after John Howard's victory in 2004. Things can change quickly. And ultimately here, we've got a situation where 2/3 of people did not vote for Anthony Albanese, despite his victory lap, like he's won the grand final today or yesterday. There's a lot of people out there who have not voted for this government. There are 1/3 of people who are not voting for either major party. And that should be cause for deep reflection on my side of politics, on all sides of politics, but certainly our side, given that we're in opposition. Why are so many people just fed up with all of us? And I do think a lot of it is the cynical, poll-driven approach that we have applied to the political process that creates a vacuum of leadership, authority, authenticity and integrity. And we'd be much better off deciding what we really believe, truly believe, go out there and argue for it. We'll show a lot more passion by doing that. We'll convince a lot more people by doing that. And maybe we'll stem the tide of people going off and flirting with a bunch of other minor parties because they just don't see anything that attracts them in the major political forces.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But I mean, just to hop in on that, I mean, an awful lot of people I know voted Pauline Hanson One Nation as their one, just simply because they said as a conservative, there was nothing for them, in the Liberals. And, there has to be a very urgent refocusing of what the party is about, because we had plenty of problems the last 3 years. Everybody went backwards. The whole country went backwards. You've got China circumnavigating the place with ships. You've got all sorts of other things, and God knows what's going to happen over the next 3 years. There needs to be an urgent agenda. And the thing is, it needs to start being sold very, very quickly. So many good ideas that were left on the shelf, if they had been started to be prosecuted, nuclear was one, but then they got kind of wobbly back and forth on it. But the other stuff, real tax cuts. How do you wind up with the Labor Party being more technically, economically rationalist than you on taxes with tax cuts? I mean, I just thought that was just, the intellectual heft of the party has gone vacant and it needs to come back.